Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour. I'm very excited to have Liz Cormier-May join us today. She is a chemist, she is an innovator and entrepreneur, and she was introduced to me to Clarissa Burt, who we've interviewed. And I was very excited to meet Liz because she is doing some amazing work in technology, health, and specifically women's health. So thank you so much for joining us today, Liz.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I'm not going to share yet exactly what all you do, but can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you go from chemistry to where you are today?
Sure, it's a great question. I started as a medicinal chemist for Novartis Pharmaceuticals, and I worked in early discovery oncology. So really what this means is I was making tons and tons of compounds, hoping that maybe someday one of them might have some type of biological relevance to stopping a recurrence of cancer or developing a drug that can completely eradicate cancer in different forms. And while all of that is super important work, and I love being a scientist, I felt a million miles away from the patient. And so I made a decision pretty early on in my career to pivot to diagnostics. And for a very specific reason, I am a huge believer that we cannot effectively treat a disease state until we can diagnose it. And the earlier we can diagnose it, the more options we then have for treatment. And so, I suppose if there's any silver lining to a global pandemic, the one thing that everybody can now agree upon is you can't treat something unless you can diagnose it. Yeah. And so that always resonated with me. And I chose diagnostics because there's so much work to be done. Mm-hmm. And especially within women's health, and especially when it comes to early detection. And I would argue that there are many, many issues in women's health that early detection would have an enormously important impact on. And I'm not just talking about improving outcomes, but giving time to make important decisions that are only relevant in women's health that don't exist in other places. So that is why I am here. And I've a few years back decided to become an entrepreneur for much of the same reasons. I believe there are better ways to get answers to patients, ways that preserve capital and time and risk mitigation factors. And my partner, Marty Kaiser at Ivy Bioholdings, which is the parent company of Mammogen, shares all of these beliefs. And we work very hard to execute differently, to bring new options, to bring affordable, scalable, deployable options within women's health and areas outside of women's health as well. But it's all about executing differently and putting pieces together in ways that they haven't been in the past, so we can make some actual quantifiable change here.
And what's nice is you're bringing in technology as well. So It's not just kind of the same old technology. You're innovating, and some of the things that we're going to talk about today is really impressive, because part of women's health exams can be a little bit invasive or uncomfortable, but what you're talking about is a way to actually make it a little bit more comfortable for us, so that it's more likely that we're going to go to them. So that's wonderful to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about, again, scalable is a very important word in our model. It's all about creating ways to get people answers, all types of people in all different parts of the world, with all different socioeconomic backgrounds, with all different levels of access to care. And liquid biopsy in general is a very important way to do that.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit? So Mammogen is your company that you founded. Can you tell us now a little bit, what is Mammogen? What is the purpose, and what are you looking to help people do?
Mammogen is at its core a women's healthcare company. We are starting with early detection breast cancer. Okay. And we could talk a little bit about the product, but really what makes Mammogen so different is that we are not just clinically focused. We believe that there is an enormous chasm between what happens in innovation and industry versus the patient experience. And so we are trying to build a bridge between our community and our products. And there are a number of different ways we're doing that. We launched a commerce play called Mammogen Marketplace, which is going to become a very important piece of creating resources of all different types for families and patients going through breast cancer treatment or survivorship or navigating their way to being a thriver. And that's a really important piece of what drives our clinical developments and decisions as well. And I'm pretty confident in saying, one, I know no other diagnostic company has ever launched an e-commerce play. Two, very few are thinking about ways to bring in non-dilutive revenue so we can fuel all of these community efforts. And three, many companies in this space aren't thinking about how to interact with their patients at all, other than donating to advocacy groups or sponsoring a walk. And we argue that that's not interacting with our communities at all. And they're not sitting down and having conversations.
So, So, okay. So can we go through right now? The option for women 40 years old or older is a mammogram. And we know that there are a lot of obstacles to getting women to doing that, such as they don't want to be exposed to the radiation, they forget, it's costly. I'm sure there's others that probably have fueled the development of this technology, right?
There are lots of reasons. I'll go through our kind of top priorities, why we're doing what we're doing. So, and I want to be very careful about this. Up until now, mammograms really are the only tools in a physician's toolbox for quote unquote early detection, right? It's the only yearly preventative type of option that they have for their patients. Is it, are they ideal? No. But up until now, it's really all we have. So, but here's the problem. I mean, mammograms have been around for 100 years with very little innovation in and around them, other than, we have 3D mammography now, that helps. We have other types of imaging now, that helps. But the problem is, for many of us, it's not just a young woman problem anymore. We have dense breasts. Nearly half of women globally have dense breasts, and that makes mammograms no more effective than a coin toss. So 47%, right? That's not good when we're talking about trying to find cancer. So that, combined with the fact that in the US, women under 40 aren't even eligible for mammograms, yet this group of women are getting more aggressive types of cancer, and they're most likely to recur. So that's a huge gap. How are we not giving this population of women the tools they need to stay well? And that's totaling 42 million women in the US alone. This is not an insignificant population number. And then we have women 55 and older who often aren't even eligible for yearly mammograms. It's every other year. And we understand why that's true as well, because in that population, often mammograms find things that aren't cancer. And so they're sent on to what become ultimately unnecessary biopsies. So I want to be very clear about what we're doing is not trying to replace any of the existing technologies. We're trying to complement them in a way that we get the right patient to the right intervention at the right time. So we're maximizing the tools we have to be as effective as possible in the correct populations that really need the technology that we have. That's really what the GenTrue test at MammaGen is doing. It's sending the right women to the right treatment at the right time.
So how do women know if they are the right person for the GenTrue test?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, GenTrue is what's called a targeted screening test. That means if you, for any reason, and there are lots of them, would be at an increased risk for breast cancer. And that could be anything from somebody in my family has it, to I carry a BRCA gene, to I went through menopause late, or I had my children late, or there's a number of reasons why somebody would be at a slightly elevated risk for breast cancer. Then you're appropriate for GenTrue. And this could be a 20-year-old who felt a lump, or this could be a 60-year-old whose sister had cancer, right? So there's a big, there's a big spectrum of appropriate patients. But what we're trying to accomplish is giving women who otherwise may not have access to a yearly mammogram without having to argue, without having to assume cost, and some of them just don't want to go. It's not I mean, I get that, right? It's not the most pleasant experience. It isn't, I'll also say it isn't quite as bad as we imagined before our first mammogram, but it's not pleasant. It takes time. There is cost. There are concerns in and around what am I exposing myself to? But I do want to be clear, yearly mammograms are important. And so we need to make time for them. We need to do our research and understand that we're not going to be exposed to, toxic levels of radiation by getting our yearly mammogram. But wouldn't it be great if we had the GenTrue test to either get women over the hurdle of being afraid of the mammogram? Because if you get this test, it is very, very, and we say, yes, you are likely to have cancer. You do. We're 90 something percent certain you do. So you need to go. I mean, we're high 90s certain.
That's
that
amazing.
you do. So we need to get you to a level of care. And what's really important about this is we're detecting stage 0 and stage 1 disease from blood or saliva. This is an easy test. It doesn't hurt. It's non-invasive. We're looking at what your RNA expression patterns are doing in your body, and we could talk about why that's important. But the goal is we can very safely rule women into or out of procedures. Yes, you have to go for that mammogram. We are very, very certain you have cancer. Or no, you're safe to be excluded from a biopsy procedure. Or no, you don't need to go on for imaging because we are very certain you don't have breast cancer. And because we're detecting it early, we give women, and especially the young women, options, not just in time. Of course, we know catching disease earlier improves clinical outcomes. But again, what we're trying to do is preserve the patient experience, preserve pieces of their life that would be otherwise drastically changed by a late stage diagnosis. And for breast cancer, these are really big changes. I mean, if we can catch stage 0 and stage 1 tumors that are less than 1 centimeter, it's a difference between lumpectomy and mastectomy. It's a difference, potentially no chemo and months of chemo, potentially no radiation and months of radiation. And those are 2 very different patient journeys.
Absolutely. Because all the side effects from chemo and radiation, I've worked with so many clients and patients in that realm. And I mean, huge, like it makes me excited hearing you say that, like to avoid all of that.
To avoid all of that and to give women time to make family planning decisions. If you're still in that stage of your life, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of breast cancer survivors, patients, thrivers, all different points in their journeys. And there's 2 things that they all say. One is being diagnosed was not the scariest day. The scariest day was the day I graduated from my care team and was expected to go back to being me, but I'm not me anymore. I'm different in every way possible. And the second thing, all of the women I've talked to said, if they were still in those family planning years, was, I wish I had more time to sit down with a reproductive endocrinologist and learn my options, more time to talk to my spouse about whether or not we were done having kids, or God forbid you didn't even start having kids. And because cancer is often so aggressive when diagnosed in these younger women, they don't have the time to do that. They are diagnosed and a week later they're in treatment. And so we need to find ways to give the gift of time, and catching it early is the best way we can do that. Because the patient journey is it's quite daunting if you don't have the time to make those very important decisions for yourself.
So basically, if you were to catch it at stage 0, possibly, or stage 1, they might be able to undergo maybe IVF and do an egg retrieval, and then have those eggs stored, do the treatment for the cancer, and then be ready to.
Exactly. They have time to sit down with a reproductive endocrinologist because it's not stage 3 and stage 4 we're catching it at. We'll hopefully we'll be catching disease much earlier for women. So they get that time to have an appointment, learn their options, take an action, and then move forward with their course of treatment.
That's incredible. You had touched a little bit about the mRNA technology. Can you go into that a little bit? How is this working with saliva and blood? I mean, so non-invasive. I mean, I know blood is a little bit, but not anywhere near traditional.
No. And this is all the field of liquid biopsy. Some people may be familiar with that term. Some may not. All it means is that we're no longer looking at just tissue to make treatment decisions. There are plenty of information and markers that are circulating through all of our biofluids. So biofluid is blood, plasma, serum, saliva, cerebral spinal fluid, urine. That's any of the fluids our body creates. There's tons of information in there. Now, traditionally, the liquid biopsy market started looking at DNA. Everybody's familiar with DNA, right? It's the code to what makes us us. But when it comes to a disease state, what people are looking at is the DNA that's coming from the tumor. Now, that has created enormously important advancements in later stage disease treatment, like, what chemo am I going to respond best to? Or am I likely to recur? Or do I need 2 kinds of chemo instead of 1? Do I have a genetic mutation that makes it so I'll only respond to a certain treatment and not at all to another? Those are all what we would consider to be later stage treatment decisions. So once we saw how successful we could be in later stage management, the industry kind of took a step back and said, let's use DNA to try to attack the holy grail of disease management, early detection. And what's come out of that is something that I think probably should have been pretty obvious from the beginning. If we need a tumor to appear, do its dirty work, die, shed, before we can start to get information from our biofluids, that by definition is not early detection.
No.
Right?
No.
So DNA does not work well for early detection in the manner it does for the later stage decisions, but RNA does, because RNA is not, we're not looking at RNA coming from the tumor. We're looking at RNA expression patterns, which basically just mean how are levels of different markers, different things in our body changing in response to a disease state. So the second something goes quote unquote wrong in your system, whether it's an infection or cancer or something that's foreign, your expression patterns start to change because your immune system is taking action. And there are tons of markers throughout our body. I mean, like 56,000 of them, RNA markers that start to be impacted by different types of foreign disease processes. So what we did is we went in and we looked at all 56,000 of them, and we found the ones that were specific to breast cancer. And what I'll tell you is we have 26 of them. Most of them have only before been associated with other disease states, not breast cancer. But when they're all coming together, they're giving us wildly important information, particularly in and around early detection of breast cancer. And so what we do is we look at which cancer patients or which potential cancer patients have these expression profiles that we know to look for. And if they exist, you're very, very likely to have cancer. And if they don't, you're very, very unlikely to have cancer. So it's a very simple, yes, you do, or no, you don't answer to get from GenTrue. And that's really the difference between early detection and not. You have to catch your body's reaction to cancer starting. And that all exists within RNA.
That's amazing. And so when you're doing this test and you're saying, okay, yes, cancer, no cancer, at this point right now, is it just a pure, you have breast cancer, or can you tell what type of breast cancer yet? Or is that still in the works or in the future?
That is a great question. We will likely bring this test to market as a yes, you have breast cancer. Though I will tell you, we are actively looking at, can we say, yes, you have DCIS versus yes, you have inflammatory. we have some early data that suggests certain of our markers are actually very specific to certain types of breast cancer.
Okay.
So I can't commit to we'll be having that information in the first round of our test, but I can tell you it is something that we are very actively looking at, and we are learning quite a bit that certain markers are associated with certain types and certain stages. And so we will get there.
And I imagine as you test more women and you get this
That's right.
information, it's going to help narrow things down. It's a bigger,
that's right. It's all about exposure to data and patients and clinical samples. And that's really where we are now. We are turning all of our science into the actual tests that we're then deploying into clinical trials. But I'm extremely proud of the number of clinical samples and patients that we've already tested the test on. I mean, we're well north of 500 patients that we have data on, and that's impressive at our stage.
So people are wondering, where can they go get this or be a part of this trial? Is that an option? Can people reach out to you, or how does that work?
People can absolutely reach out to us. The test won't be available for generalized use until end of next year, very early in 2024, which I will say is also warp speed for diagnostic innovation. And that has a lot to do with how we approach our science. It will be a PCR test, which is important because PCR is the most inexpensive, deployable, scalable technology for a test like this. We very, very definitively chose not to do next generation sequencing, which is what a lot of tests are in the market, because it's much more expensive, much more time consuming. It will be a reason why some people won't be able to get the test if we chose to go with that technology because of cost. And our mission is to make sure that no woman who needs this test ever has to say, I can't afford that.
That's incredible.
So there's a number of different ways we're working to make that true, but choosing PCR is the first step.
Okay. And with the PCR test, will it be saliva, something swab up your nose, that type of thing?
It will. So in our clinical trial, we are doing both saliva and blood draws.
Okay.
And so it will be either one or both of those options.
Okay. That's amazing.
And we're working towards being able to do something as simple as dried blood spots, a tiny little dried blood spot.
Wow.
That will give us all the information we need. That's a little bit in the future, but you can imagine the impacts that would have as we launch, where you need a physician to get the test, but we mature to a point where it becomes a direct to consumer testing, which is where we absolutely want to go. It's where the market is going. And so in that type of application, it's very important that you need as little amount of samples possible, and it's super easy for somebody to give it to us.
Yeah, because so many people unfortunately do not like going to a physician once a year or twice a year or whatever. And if they can just order it online and get the kit and then send it off with some simple instructions, you just eliminated a huge barrier.
That's paradigm shifting. And that's really what we want to do, because like you said, even people like me, I'm the worst patient ever, and I do this all day, and I try to be compliant, but I have 2 kids and a husband and life, and things get busy and meetings come up and travel. And so it's easy for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to do my mammogram next month. And then next month turns into the next month. And then, and all of a sudden you're 6 months out from when you should have had your mammogram, and going into that appointment is now a little bit more scary. You made the wrong choice by not going. You're less likely to go the later, you push things off. And so a test that's super simple and sensitive and specific that could show up at your house and you could take, that changes things.
That
changes things. And we hope that when we get to that point, it will be, for some women, it will be the answer they need to go and see their physician. For others, it will be just a source of constant and accessible information. For some, it will probably be family decisions that are being made. If you're a breast cancer family, that's a scary family to be in for young women. And so maybe a mammogram at 25 is a little bit too overwhelming. Maybe a blood test is a lot easier. So there's a lot of different elements that go into this.
Now this is kind of thinking ahead a little bit, but let's say a woman, they take your test, she finds out, okay, she does have cancer, she goes in for more testing, she goes through a treatment, and she's considered cancer-free.
Yep.
Can she then use this test in the future to help monitor, in addition to, regular screenings that she might have typically after you have cancer, the 6-month checkups and that? Can she use this as like, okay, I want to do this once a month or whatever, just to make sure?
Yeah,
is that a possibility?
That is absolutely our goal, is to
Okay.
make this a test that people can use to give them the peace of mind they need to stay well.
Wow. That's incredible. So, and then other thing I was going to ask too is there a difference in the expression of the mRNA or anything in between saliva and blood? So will those 26 markers show up differently in saliva versus blood? Or are you still kind of going through that, trying to figure that out?
That's a great question. And the answer is no, it is the same.
Okay.
26
Wow.
messenger RNA biomarkers that are important in this decision, whether it's coming from saliva or blood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a great question, because that is further validation that we are really understanding the core biology of the disease. And that's really what unlocks early detection, is knowing exactly what's changing and when, and catching it as early as possible.
That's just incredible. Wow. I mean, just what you can do, because there you have people who will not go in for blood tests. They get very nervous. So you have an option for saliva. So, I mean, it just gets easier and easier for people to just, you're taking down the barriers. That's incredible.
That's it. That's really what we're trying to do, is make it as easy as possible for us to keep ourselves healthy and well. And then to make sure that we're integrating with all of the pieces of a patient or survivor or thriver journey, so that Mammogen becomes not just a place I go and get my test, but a place I come to get all types of resources, from how do I interview a breast surgeon, to why did nobody tell me that chronic lymphedema was something that breast cancer patients deal with for the rest of their lives in huge numbers. Like, what do I do about this? Right. So it's all about the full journey. The clinical early detection test is just one piece of that.
That's incredible. And it's so nice because like you care about people, you're taking that next step, because so many times when you get diagnosed with something, you're like, oh no, I don't even know what questions to ask to even find someone to help me out. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it's for me, it's been a huge gaping hole in the diagnostics industry. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, but it has always infuriated me that the last interaction we have with a patient in diagnostics is sending them a bill. How could that be the last interaction we have with a group of people that we say we care about? That just doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. It leaves tremendous room for error and treatment decisions. This cannot be the way diagnostics continue to operate. So if it's me and Mammogen and our team who are the first to get out there and say, we're changing this, here's how we're changing this, here's why we're changing this, though that part should be obvious, and we're not going to stop until it's changed, then so be it. Then we'll be those people.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So so right now, you're in the clinical trial stage. Okay, so for the general public who are listening, what can they participate in, look up, be notified of right now?
If you are somebody who you think would be interested in participating in the clinical trials, reach out to us. Our info email is on our website. We have the clinical trial is going to be across 20 different sites within the United States. Okay. So even if you don't fit into this initial one, there are more coming, and I'm very actively looking at ways to even change the way we do clinical trials so that they're more mobile in nature, so that anybody who's appropriate can have access to a clinical trial, because that's an important piece too. Right now, clinical trials are very restrictive, and we can only, our technology is only as good as the patients we can bring into our ecosystem to learn from. So we are also actively looking at how do we better represent larger populations of people within clinical trials. So even if it's not this one, please let us know who you are, where you are. If your family is one that you think should be on our radar, because as we mature, we are going to do everything we can to make sure not just patients get our test, but people who should have access to clinical trials do.
Okay. And can you share the website that people should go to?
Yes, it is mammogen, MAMMOGEN.bio, BIO.
Okay. So that way people can go there, they can get information on the clinical trials, they can sign up or
sign up. You can support Mammogen Marketplace. There's a link to Mammogen Marketplace there, which right now is just starting with all types of Mammogen logo gear. I'm wearing one with our hashtag, let's be unreasonable. Because while the rest of the world thinks it's unreasonable to do things differently, we don't. So we embrace being unreasonable and support us there. Everything goes towards our clinical development and all of our community endeavors. Our very first community partnership was with a wonderful company called Brilliantly, who has created app-controlled discrete breast warmers for people who have had mastectomies. Chronic chest coldness is a huge problem for many breast cancer survivors and previvors. And so Kristen Carbone, their founder and CEO, created this wonderful product, and Mammogen sponsored the giveaway for 50 free pairs of Brilliantly warms to women who otherwise wouldn't have access to them. And so when I say we're doing these community endeavors, that those are the types of things we're talking about. And my dream is to be able to, have food delivered to women going through chemo on their chemo days, so they don't have to worry about feeding themselves or their family. And my dreams are huge. My vision board there is immense, but you got to start somewhere. So supporting Mammogen Marketplace is step one, and you will start to see tools being added to Mammogen Marketplace, other products that are founded by women, cancer survivors. So we're step one, but that's incredible. Step one.
That's awesome. Okay, and this one more thing, because I know this technology isn't just limited to breast cancer detection. You're also using it for endometriosis too, right? Or looking for those?
We are starting our endometriosis journey, but this very same technology is being used on early detection lung cancer at our sister company, Liquid Lung, early detection liver disease for NAFL and NASH at our other sister company called HepGene. So there is a whole portfolio of companies that my partner Marty founded Ivy Bio Holdings, which created Mammogen, Liquid Lung, and HepGene. And we are very actively applying this very same technology across multiple disease states that really need early detection.
Yeah, this is incredible. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing this. It's been such valuable information. I thank you so much for your time and just sharing with us.
No, it's my absolute distinct pleasure. And however Mammogen or myself can be helpful to anybody within your ecosystem or your listeners, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do personally answer every single inquiry that comes in. Sometimes it takes a couple days, but I do get through to them all.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much again. And thank you all for joining us today. What an amazing conversation. Please go check out Liz's website, get some more information, try to get into those clinical trials if you can, if you're appropriate for that. But thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you again next weekend. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you.